Okay, so ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us this evening at INNX, an amazing place. If you haven't been here before, oh my God, it's just such a wonderful, wonderful place to be at. I'd like to begin by acknowledging that we are on the land of the Awabakal people, the traditional custodians of the land, and I'd like to pay my respects to elders past, present and future. I extend that respect and that welcome to Aboriginal and Torres Islander people here today. I'm very grateful for the respect that they show the land and that they show all sentient beings, and I look back in order to look forward and to shape the future that we all have and can have together. So welcome to this Hunter Innovation Festival event. If you turn around and have a look at two ladies standing up the back there, that's you. They deserve an extra round of applause. Claire has been the coordinator of the Hunter Innovation Festival, and the lady next to her has put this wonderful event together. So thank you very much, ladies. And I believe, who was hand making the food in the kitchen? That was superb. So thank you so much for that. That was wonderful. So welcome to the Hunter Innovation Festival event. I actually had the privilege of being on the organising committee for probably 13 of the 15 years that it's been going, and it is absolutely remarkable and wonderful to not have to have been Claire with, I can just imagine the web feet paddling under the water and the head going, yeah, this is great, everything's fine, and the feet madly going underneath. So Claire, amazing job, well done, thank you. And it's really wonderful for me to actually watch something that has grown and that has, it's like that 10-year overnight success story. It's kind of been like that 15-year overnight success story, which is wonderful. So thank you for putting this event on, and thank you for all the wonderful events that have happened. There's another few days, so if you want to have a look at the website and find yourselves a couple of more events, they've all been absolutely fantastic, and they're quite varied and different. Okay, so what is innovation and why is it important? So the whole festival has been about innovation. When we started the Hunter Innovation Festival 15 years ago, it was one of those things people went, in a what? And then all of a sudden everybody was into innovation. Everybody wanted to talk about it, and they all wanted to have an innovation person in their organisation. At some point it was a lot of talk, and then as what happens, the talk turns into action. So can I just ask you, and this is audience participation, what is innovation to you? What is innovation? Anyone? Yes?
It's coming up with an idea and putting it into action.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Anyone else? Awesome answer. Brien's a panelist. You'll see him in a minute, or in a few minutes. Anyone else? What's innovation to you? Yeah.
Better ways of doing things.
Mm-hmm. Better ways of doing things? Sometimes they are. I've got this awesome book. It's called the Cluck's Book of Innovations. Awesome. Really good. So I'd just like to read to you. I had the absolute honour of meeting Clayton Christensen a few years ago. He's passed away now, but I met him at a Boston Innovation Conference, and he's known to be the godfather of disruptive innovation. And I have a photo with Clayton Christensen, and I'm usually the shortest one in the photo, but he's like 7'2", and it looks like he's on stilts, and it looks like I'm on my knees. But anyway, it's an awesome photo. He was the most gentle, amazing soul who spoke with such a soft voice. And this is his definition. I'm just going to read it straight out of his book. Disruptive innovation describes a process by which a product or service powered by a technology enabler initially takes root in simple applications at the low end of a market, typically by being less expensive and more accessible, and then relentlessly moves up market, eventually displacing established competitors. Disruptive innovations are not breakthrough innovations or ambitious upstarts that dramatically alter how business is done, but rather consist of products and services that are simple, accessible, and affordable. These products and services often appear modest at their outset, but over time have the potential to transform an industry. So for a lot of people, innovation has many different meanings, and they're all true as far as I'm concerned. I've been in the innovation game for quite some time, and I think we've got everything from incremental to disruptive to distractive to lots and lots of different terms now for innovation. And it is what it is to you, and it is how do we make things better. So how do we make our lives better? Technology has taken us ahead in leaps and bounds, and people often go, yeah, but technology is also that thing that you know, can be cruel and can do harm. And I go, well, actually, no, it's not the technology that does that, it's the human behind the tech. So for me, if we can use technology to create better lives for people and to enhance people's lives, we're going to be able to catch and cradle some of those people that might do naughty things with innovation and with technology before that happens. My organisation is Singularity U Australia, and we say that we exist at the intersection of the values of humanity with the value of technology. And for me, that's what it is. And you're going to hear lots of wonderful things along the lines of humanness and consciousness and conscious leadership as we get to the panel tonight. But first of all, we are going to hear from the wonderful Naomi Nash. Naomi, would you like to come out? So round of applause for Naomi, please. And so by way of introduction, if you want to read bios and everything else, then you can. So I'm just going to get Naomi to say, where are you from? What's your organisation?
So I'm from New River Leadership, based in Sydney.
Okay, and my question is going to be this to each of the panellists. Tell me something that I can't read about you on LinkedIn and that I'm not going to find if I stalk you on the internet.
Okay, well, you won't read on my LinkedIn that I spent the last 2 weeks leading an Indigenous immersion in Cape York, trying to keep 17 and 18-year-old boys away from crocodiles.
Right.
Or crocodiles away from 17 and 18-year-olds.
Okay.
Yeah.
I would have no issue being away from the crocodiles. Naomi's going to give us a bit of a talk on innovation and all the things that she does, so please another little round of applause.
Okay, so my job, thank you very much, is to warm us up so that this group of incredible business professionals and people that I've already met, some of you, can give this panel a really hard time. Because the last thing we want is for the panellists tonight to have an easy night. That's not what we came here to do. We want the hard questions. So my job is to warm you up. We're going to have a bit of fun. I will talk for a little while, and in about 15 minutes we'll invite the panellists up if they're brave, if they're still feeling brave. Okay. In 1815, Germany's General Music Journal published a letter in which Mozart described his creative process. Here it is. When I am, as it were, completely myself, entirely alone and of good cheer, say travelling in a carriage or walking after a good meal, or during the night when I can't sleep, it's on such occasions that my ideas flow. They flow best and most abundantly. All of this fires my soul, and provided I'm not disturbed, my subject enlarges itself. It becomes methodized and defined, and the whole, though it be long, stands before me almost finished and complete in my mind, so that I can survey it like a fine picture or a beautiful statue at a glance. Nor do I hear in my imagination the parts successively, but I hear them, as it were, all at once. When I proceed to write down my ideas, committing it to paper is done easily enough. For everything is, as I said before, already finished. And it rarely differs on paper from what it was in my imagination. This letter has inspired many creators and innovators in its time. It's been republished in bestsellers in 1945, in 1976, and even in 2012. There's one problem though. It's a forgery. It's a complete lie. It was actually written by Mozart's, one of his biographers. It's a forgery. To warm us up tonight, I'm going to tell you 4 stories about innovation. We're going to hear from industry, we're going to hear from research, and what we're going to do is we're going to unpack some commonly held myths about innovation. Because we all have this idea that it's the lone genius when the weather is perfect. That's how innovation happens. When we, in actual fact, how do we create an environment for innovation is much more interesting and surprising than that. So I'm going to tell you 4 stories. We're going to do it fast. We're hopefully going to have some fun, and hopefully it'll challenge your thinking a little bit and get you ready to ask these tricky questions. But before we start, I'd like to do an experiment. Are we up for an experiment?
Yep.
Okay. So, can I ask everyone to my right to close your eyes?
To your right.
To stage right.
This way.
This side.
That side.
This side. Close your eyes. Okay. Everyone else, I'm going to show you an image. Have a look at it. Don't say what it is. Just take it in. Okay. And I want you guys now to close your eyes. And my friends here who close their eyes first, you can open your eyes. I'm going to show you an image. Don't say what it is. Just get it in your mind. Okay. Now everyone can close their eyes. And on the count of 3, what I want you to do is open your eyes and describe to me what you see. It's just say it in one word. Ready, set, go. Okay, what happened? What just happened? Some people said person or face.
Interpretation.
But yeah, some people said, I heard a lot of mouse from this trouble section in the audience here. I heard a lot of mouse from here. Yeah. Okay, so now everyone can keep their eyes open, and I'll show you what I did. So this is the image I showed the first group. This is the image I showed the second group. And this is the image I showed you all. And what this is an example of is the way our brains work is that we make meaning by pattern recognition. So I preloaded some of your brains with a face and some of your brains with a mouse. And then when I showed you a third image that's kind of a combination of both, you interpret it based on what I had already in your mind. This happens with innovation. We all bring stories and preconceived ideas around what this word means. Tonight is an opportunity for you to break out of that idea and hopefully hear from some different things from each other. Okay, 4 stories. Are we ready? We're going to do them fast. Are we ready?
Yep.
Yes? Maybe just check with the person next to you. Are you ready? Was there enough? Wine, kombucha? Who are my fruity kombucha people? Who are my fruity kombucha? Yes, that was excellent. That was the favourite tonight. Okay. 4 stories. We're in this together. What kinds of environments? 4 stories. Here we go. This is the guy, Chris Rock, comedian, global comedian hero. When he's beginning to work on a new world tour, what Chris Rock does is he appears at small venues, usually 50 people or less, unannounced. He shows up with a pen and a legal pad. He walks in and sits down on a stool and he starts talking to the audience conversationally. As he's talking, he doesn't have any plan. He notices someone fidgeting in their seat, someone smiling and nodding. And those cues he takes as the beginning of what might be good material. These performances are boring. And people walk out of them going, Chris Rock, man, he's lost it. He's lost his touch. What he does, usually for a whole year before a world tour, is night after night this process. And slowly but surely, new ideas emerge based on the feedback he's getting from his audience. He will even pause mid-performance to make a note when something's worked. Or he might even say to the audience, oh, that's going to need a lot more work if it's going to make it. Repetition of these mistakes, poor performance night after night after night, eventually after hundreds if not thousands of these little experiments, Chris Rock will have literally a handful of solid ideas that'll make a 1-hour special that goes global. So innovation isn't about the magic nighttime idea coming to you completely. In the school of Chris Rock, it's actually about failing a lot and really hard work. Second one, okay, collaboration and group genius. There's a myth that innovation is a thing that we do on our own. And a guy named Keith Sawyer did some research. He wanted to really understand, how does innovation happen? How does creativity happen? So he decided to look in the brains of jazz musicians. He thought, if I can look at the mind of a jazz musician while they're making music, maybe I can figure out why some live music falls flat and other performances are transformative. I want to know what the code is. And he looked in the mind of these individual players, he looked at MRIs, he looked at a whole lots of stuff, and he got bored because he wasn't seeing much at all. Then he changed his question. What if innovation is something, what if the great performance is actually something that's happening between the drummer and the bass player? So he started to look at the interactions between jazz musicians and the nature of those interactions and how they translate into the quality of the performance. And what he found was, it's actually how people listen to each other, how they build on each other's ideas, how much trust and a spirit of play there is, and how much permission to take risks there is. That's what makes a great performance. That's what makes something alive. So innovation isn't something that we do on our own. And it isn't something that requires huge amounts of technical expertise. It didn't matter how qualified the musicians were. It mattered what was the nature of the relationship between them. Could they play together? Could they experiment together? Could they discover? So Keith Sawyer tells us innovation is not about doing it alone, it's about collaboration and this idea of group genius. And I recommend you go and have a look at group genius and how it works. Okay. So, at this juncture, I was going to get you to find as many alternative uses as you could for a coat hanger in a minute, but I'm already running over time, so you don't have to do that job tonight. All right. Third story of 4. Are we going okay? Yep. It's a lot, I know. Good, all right. Good. Is anybody here tonight wearing shoes or a jacket or a piece of clothing that's got Gore-Tex in it? It's too sunny today for that. Yeah. Yes, maybe? No. Okay, so, but you've all heard of Gore-Tex, right?
What's Gore-Tex?
Gore-Tex is like a waterproofing. It's a thing that can make shoes waterproof or jackets waterproof. Yeah, okay. So my third story is about what some people have called the most innovative company in America. I'm sure they only held that title for a short period of time. W.L. Gore. Gore-Tex was founded with a polymer. And that polymer was used mostly in space technology and spacesuits. But W.L. Gore, the guy who runs it, wanted to have a really innovative company. So he decided, we've got this polymer, we know how to make spacesuits and space equipment with it, but I'm sure we can do other things with the polymer. So what I'm going to do is everyone who works for me is going to get a certain amount of their time at work to experiment with the polymer. The only rules are you have to be using our technology, but in a new way. If you think you've got an idea worth the business investing in, there's a couple of criteria it's got to meet, but otherwise everyone gets 15-20% of their time to dabble. One of the engineers at W.L. Gore was a cyclist, and he had that annoying thing go on, if you're a cyclist you'll know, where his gear changing wasn't smooth. So he started to use the polymer to coat the line on his bicycle, and it worked. And he sort of thought, okay, who else uses strings and who else needs smooth movement? And he thought about puppeteers. So he started putting the polymer on guitar strings and different types of strings for Disney puppeteers and getting really smooth, subtle movement for them. But then he was holding a guitar string and he thought, I wonder whether this could be useful for guitarists. And he worked for 18 months or so with a musician to develop a guitar string made of the same polymer, the same Gore-Tex material. And now W.L. Gore make one of the most popular types of guitar strings sold in the world. Is there any guitarists here tonight? Yeah? Do you like Elixir strings?
Yes.
That is where they came from, my friend.
Yeah.
Out of space. So, what can we learn from W.L. Gore that's surprising? Innovation requires inefficient use of time. It requires margin and redundancy. If there's no margin in your work week, if there's no redundancy in your KPI plan for your staff, if there's no room for them to experiment with new ideas and dabble, most of which goes nowhere, then you're never going to have an environment where people can go from spacesuits to guitar strings. Lucky last. Experimentation and learning. Two aid workers, Simon and Jane Berry, realised that one of the biggest killers of children in the world is actually just dehydration, usually caused by dysentery or other diseases, but it's really just about dehydration. And they know that there's medication for dehydration, there's things that we can do, but the medication doesn't get to the remotest parts of the world, particularly in Africa where they were looking. And when they spent time in these villages where the medicine was sorely needed, one of the things they noticed was that Coca-Cola made it to the villages. And so they thought, okay, how about we create a really clever package that fits between the top of the Coke bottles, so that when the Coke bottles are being transported, the medicine can kind of sit neatly in between the bottles, and maybe that way the medicine will get to the villages. The idea was so brilliant that it won British Design Awards, it won all kinds of aid and development awards, and absolutely the medicine got to children. But there's a twist in the story. Everyone was talking about how clever this packaging is, but in the implementation of that packaging, they also started to look a bit at the value chain and the distribution chain and talk to people who were actually carrying the Coke and now the medicine to the remote villages. And what they found was the reason that the Coca-Cola made it to the village is because every distributor along the line, the guy who takes one crate on his bicycle or 10 crates in his truck and does that sort of section of the road, gets to take a bottle or two. And so value and payment was being made at different informal junctions of the supply chain. And that's why the Coca-Cola gets through, because it's in everybody's interest. If I deliver this, I get to have my portion. So in the end, they didn't need the packaging at all. They just made sure there was payment for everybody along the value chain. So sometimes we think innovation is about the brilliant, shiny solution and the idea, when in actual fact, after experimenting, if we have a look at what we're really doing and we learn, and we're open to learn from what's really happening, we discover that often our solution isn't the thing. It's not the thing that's most important. It's the outcome that you're creating, and you can't know that till you get in there. You've got to make the package and win the British Design Award to figure that out potentially, but that is what real innovation and impact's about. So, busting some innovation myths. That one's all about experimenting. Learn by actually doing it. Fail quickly to learn fast. So, all of these stories have iteration in them. All of these stories have repetition, whether it's Chris Rock doing terrible performances in small New York clubs, or whether it's our lovely couple doing aid and development. It's not till you get out there and do something and learn that you can really get traction. So environments for innovation, it's not Mozart, it's not midnight, it's not it falling from the sky for you. You don't have to wait to be a solo heroic genius. That's not really what we came here tonight. If you're looking for the magic solo genius kombucha, it's not here. This is actually about how do we create environments where we can fail and work hard together, where we can collaborate and unlock group genius, where we can build some margin and some redundancies for play and for experimentation, and where we can learn from that experimentation as we go. There's a few snapshots from across research. The other thing, before I say that, some snapshots from across research and some different industries. You all have stories though of when you've seen innovation work, and we could put a 5th, 6th, 7th bubble on this screen based on just what's in this room tonight. So I want to encourage you at this point, there's some provocation from us about all the things we could talk about, but in a moment I'm going to get you to talk to the person next to you about what some of your experiences have been at what really enables innovation. Before you do that though, have a little look under your seat.
Is this like GoPro?
Oh, no.
If you feel that there's something, grab it. If you feel playful, I hope we've created a spirit of play. Put them on. Put them on, show everyone, give them a look.
Well done.
Yeah, nice. Coming.
Better than my son.
Third row, is anyone in the third row? Here we go, there they are. Hello. Okay.
Oh no, look at those ones.
I'm curious to hear here, with the lenses that you put on there, are there any advantages to your particular lenses? What's really working well for you?
Green.
Green is always excellent, yes.
Everything's green. They're obstructive.
Yeah, so there might be some disadvantages as well. Any disadvantages there in the...
Put glitter in my eye.
Contacts in, I don't need them.
Oh, they look great. Everyone needs to get a look at those. That's really cool.
Especially when you're a rock star.
Yeah, you could have come in wearing those. We all bring a particular lens. Nice. We all bring a particular lens to leadership. There'll be advantages to the way you've been looking at it, but there'll also be disadvantages. Tonight is just a playful, hopefully open and diverse invitation to sort of take those lenses off, try on a different way of looking at it, and hopefully help us as a... Oh yeah, now you're dancing, Nikki. Yeah. You have to wear those. You have to wear those.
Wear them on the panel.
Yeah. Tonight's an invitation to become a bit more aware of what has been my lens on innovation, and is it working for me? In what ways might I change my thinking? All right. While the panel's coming up, have a little chat to the person next to you. Either what's a question that you've got that you'd really like to ask the panel, or in your experience, what are some of the ingredients that really make this innovation thing work? Over to you.
Thank you, Naomi. Thank you. Take a seat.
Oh, yeah.
So I'm going to ask the panel up one by one because I really want to spotlight them and I really want to say to them, Nikki, would you like to come up?
Sure.
You need to bring your glasses. Do I? No. Whatever's comfortable.
They look great.
So this is Nikki, everybody. Please make Nikki feel welcome. Nikki Wright. So can you tell everybody what it is that you do? Yep. What do you do? I'm director of Mezzanine. It's just in this office here. In this amazing. We're a brand agency. And could you please tell these people one thing they can't find out about you if they stalk you? I've been thinking about this, Christine. I couldn't think of anything except I met my husband when I was 12. And yeah, and the day I met him, I went home and I wrote about what our future was going to be like and what our kids' names were going to be. Oh my God! And fell in love with him when I was 12. So I think that deserves a round of applause. Like, whoa, no, you. Okay, what's one thing you won't read about? Okay, now you will, because we might write about it. Okay, so Brien, can I get you to come up, please? Brien McVernon, everybody. Round of applause. So Brien, what is it that you do?
Currently I'm a musician and a music teacher, but I've dabbled in lots of things. I've spent time in New Jersey as an art district developer, came back with a lot of new ideas, but Newcastle Council seemed to be not willing to listen to them.
They might now.
They may now, and I think it's a great time for Newcastle at the moment for that. Yeah, the city has grown enough to make that a possibility.
So is that New Jersey thing the one thing that people won't be able to stalk you about? Because I think that's not true.
No, they can stalk me on that.
So what's the non-stalkable thing?
Possibly my belief in peace and calm and the universe as it is, and how we have to just accept the way we live, the way I try not to preach about my personal beliefs too much, you know. I just think everything is impermanent, but while we're here we should make the best of what we have.
Beautiful, thank you. Okay. And I didn't do this on purpose. I didn't go 2 girls, a boy and 2 girls, but that's how it's going to end up. Cherie, would you like to join us? Yeah. Cherie Johnson, everybody.
I feel like Robert Palmer right now.
Is that why you wore the jeans? No.
Yeah.
So Cherie, what is it that you do?
So I run a company called Speaking in Colour, so we're an Aboriginal education company.
And what's the one thing that I can't find out about you by stalking you?
We have a pet lizard called Dave.
Oh yeah.
He's a bearded dragon.
Oh, I love them.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I had one when
So before we get into the first question, Cherie and I had a conversation last night because we were at the same innovation event last night as well. And I said to Cherie, will you do the acknowledgement of country? No, would you do, or do you do, where are you from? You do welcome or acknowledgement?
She said, why aren't you doing the welcome to country?
Yes. And you said, Good question.
No,
Ask me tomorrow night.
No, you did not. You said, what do you mean does the token chick need to do? Like, does the token chick need to do the... And I said, what did I say? I said... Well, clearly I have a better memory for the conversation.
Yeah, what did you say? I think you said, oh yeah, well why wouldn't you do it?
Yeah.
I don't want to be disrespectful. I thought it would have been a respectful thing to have asked you to have done it.
And then I said, well, why aren't you going to do it? And she said, I'm not going to tell you till tomorrow night. So here we are. So what was it? Like,
Okay, so the difference between acknowledgement and a welcome. So a welcome to country is done by someone who's from that place, like a traditional owner, or they've got descendancy from place. But acknowledgement can be done by anybody.
Yeah.
So it's about perspective, right? So it's how do I have a localised lens of place and how do I acknowledge? So you tonight done that beautifully. The other day I actually did a session with, I did a lot of training with different corporates and whatnot, and we're in a head of business meeting with the NIB, and I was there particularly on the agenda to talk about this, how to do acknowledgement versus welcome, how do we, rah. And Mark from across the room goes, well, I just did it. What did I do right and what did I do wrong? And I said, well, I wasn't going to mark you on it. But as the leader of the ship, you just leaned in. And even though I was in the room and even though I was there to do that particular conversation, as the leader, you still leant in and you were being respectful of people and country. So it's something that people get super awkward about because they just don't want to be offensive. Completely get it. I get it. But, as a mum, I do things not fabulous all the time too. As a driver, I do things not fabulous all the time too. But it's just becoming normal and having a go of it. So you always think of the why. It's not about remembering how to do a script properly. It's about just being respectful of country and people and place.
Thank you. Okay.
Well said.
All right. Okay, so I'm never going to ask any of my Indigenous friends to do it. Okay, no. So let's get stuck into the innovation conversation. And the way we want to do this is if you've got something to add to the conversation, please add it at any time. And don't wait till the end till we go, right, now we're going to do Q&A. If you've got a question as we go through, please just raise your hand or do something that grabs my attention and we'll go straight to the question. Or just ask straight the question to the panellists. One thing I don't think I did properly at the beginning was to acknowledge all the sponsors of the Hunter Innovation Festival. Claire, do you want to rattle them off because I forgot to write them down and I know there's many people who have actually contributed to the festival?
And I'm just going to put you on the spot right now, sure. Absolutely. So firstly, I'd like to acknowledge our festival partner, which is the City of Newcastle. So they've been phenomenal this year. Also then in terms of our sponsors, we've got Lake Quarry City Council, fabulous people at the University of Newcastle I2N, so Siobhan Kern and the team there. We have the Garris Group and we have the wonderful Oz Industry, which is represented by the fabulous Natalie Gillum here tonight.
Where is that? Oh, there you are, hiding.
Yes, those are, I haven't missed anyone now, have I? No.
Okay, beautiful.
Yes, that's it.
Okay. So it's a wonderful collaboration, again, going back to what Naomi was saying before. So the first question for the panellists is, what do you consider to be your most innovative moment and what were the factors that led and contributed to that moment? So I'm going to go to you first, Nikki.
You're going to go me first.
That's huge.
I can do that because I'm the moderator.
Yeah, no, that's okay. It's okay. So I think, based on what you were saying before, Naomi, in terms of we think innovation's this aha moment or this, this big idea that we have. And I just think on that question, I can't think of a moment in time where I feel like I've had that. It's more of a build-up of ideas and activities that lead to a shift or a change. So in regards to that, I think when I think about all the things that are actually common, like the common factors of those moments throughout my career, and I guess not just in my career, in other aspects of my life, there's things like common factors like purpose. When you're at most innovative, it's something that's really meaningful to you. You're doing something that there's a purpose behind, you're really attached to it. You can see the positive impact on the other side of it. And I also think purpose is a towards goal rather than an avoid type of goal, so which is more conducive to innovation and creative ideas. Another thing would be strengths. something where I'm applying my strengths. Most creative when you know what your strengths are. So I've got things like love of learning, I've got writer, I've got incubator, I've got curiosity. So whenever I'm in a situation where I'm able to apply those strengths, I find that my thinking and my innovation is so much more fluid. It's like that flow, like Cherie, the researcher on flow. So I think strengths were always involved. Another thing people don't think of a lot is positive emotion. Positive emotion's always involved with innovation, I find. Like you talk about play. I researched positive psychology, so when you look at that, positive emotion, Barbara Fredrickson's broaden and build theory around positive emotion actually brings more possibilities. It allows you to expand your thinking, it allows you to build upon ideas, whereas a negative emotion mindset actually brings you into a narrow focus, which isn't good or bad, it's just a different area. If you're trying to build something like a goal set path, slightly negative or neutral emotions are actually better for that. But I find in a creative environment, positive emotion is always around when you have your most innovative moments. And on collaboration, I think the other thing would be definitely people around you that are also experiencing those same things. So if they're working to their strengths, if they've got purpose and meaning in what they're doing as well, and they're bringing positive emotion to the space, I find that's when collaboration happens. So I can think of an example we're working on. We've been working recently in the last few years, Mezzanine, with Hunter Water, working on an app for changing teenagers' behaviour around their shower time and how much water they're actually using.
Can I have it?
So, yeah. Well, having a shower is a really emotional thing, so it's really hard to change that behaviour, It's time for them to go in and have their time and go under the hot water, and it's the same for everyone. But I guess when we were collaborating, there was a really beautiful moment of innovation when we actually went into the school and we actually collaborated with all the kids. And we pulled them all together, and there was me and a UX design and a developer, and we're all talking to them. And it's a really great moment of innovation where you've got that positive emotion, but you're also finding all the different perspectives and you're sort of bouncing off each other, and the ideas just build. And we're talking with the kids and they're injecting things, what if you do this? And some of the best ideas for the development of that app came from 13 and 14-year-olds. So I think that was probably an example of that.
Good old user experience, eh? Go to the source. Amazing. Yeah. Thank you. Brien, what would you consider to be, I know you write songs, so it's probably hard to go one moment, but what are the commonalities as Nikki went through the common things for her? What were the things that triggered innovation? What were the factors that contributed for you?
Oh, look, I think, taking it away from the songs, I think probably the thing that impacted me the most with innovation was the fact that I'd met a guy called James Kennedy in Peru, and he was from New Jersey, and 4 years later he offered me a job in New Jersey and said, I want you to come be my art district developer. And I arrived in New Jersey with no idea of what I was going to do. And he wasn't there. He was in California doing something. And I sent him a message and said, so I'm here. And he said, yeah, I'll be there in 2 weeks. I'm off doing something. And I said, so what do you want me to do? And he said, come up with some ideas of how you can develop an art district. And all of a sudden I'm going, I'm here and I don't know anyone. How can I do this? And so I had to go. And my first thought was, well, I'm a musician, so I'll see if I can find more musicians. And I'd spent a lot of time in New York before that. But then I'm kind of like, well, there's all these other things. So then I started auditing the city to go, who does creative arts in the city? Who are the actors? Who are the dancers? Who are the drama people? Who are the musicians? Who are anyone involved in that? And I found that they're all separated. The dancers did their dance, the musicians did their music, and it went, so how do we get these people together to create an arts hub? How do we get everyone on the same page? Because they're all doing creative things, but they're not connecting to each other. So how do we make them connect so that, and so then there was a theatre, and I went, okay, we've got this theatre, so why don't we get the actors and the dancers and the musicians and everyone together in the city and start working on programs that we can do that. And then it was like, okay, so we've got that, but we're only half an hour outside Manhattan, so maybe we should extend this and start inviting actors from Manhattan to come out and live in New Jersey, and we should start getting painters to come and do that and say, well, we can pay you this money if you paint these sets for a show. That will give you the income to do your other creative arts, your individual works, and then we can go, so you're an actor and you're trying to get onto Broadway, but we can do musical theatre things here, and you can develop your skills so that you can then develop that. And we created a show, was like American Idol, but for music theatre, but it was exclusive to New Jersey, where we did a search for the best music theatre singers in New Jersey, from upstate, downstate, midstate, and their contract was a year contract that they won with a publicist for Manhattan, where they could go to Broadway and have a year's contract with a publicist, with everything that you would want to become a Broadway star. And it was just like, my head was just like in overflow, because it was like, you just gave me the ticket to freedom to just bring creatives together, you know, and now that city of Rahway is cited as the American model for art district development. And the whole concept was, how do you use the arts to become the economic stimulus for a city, you know? And
So I think it's very timely that you speak to Newcastle City Council again, because I know we
Sure.
went through a few years ago where we were trying to decide whether we were going to take Newcastle into the arts or the surf or the, you know, whatever it was. And I think we heard the other night that Newcastle has the highest number of creatives, people working in the creative industry.
Absolutely. And you know, and I came back from that experience going, we should just be taking Melbourne on. We should be saying, why would you go and live in Melbourne? It's cold in winter. You don't have great beaches. You don't have the vineyards 40 minutes away. You don't have Port Stephens just up the road. You don't have all this stuff. We've got all of this.
True.
If we would just build, and it seems like it's building around this district here, if we build an art district in Newcastle, we could just attract every creative from Australia into this city to create the best creative arts centre in the country.
Awesome.
We don't want all of them, we just want the good ones.
All right, so hold that thought, because that will come again into the next question. Cherie, your aha moment, or your moment where the innovation all fell together, like what were the factors that led up to it for you?
There's been a couple for me, which has been really lovely, actually. I thrive on the aha moments, but they always come in the quiet, don't they? Or when there's a bit of buffer. That was a good reminder tonight, so thank you. I'm going to take that back to the team. Yeah, it's good. I think for me too, as a creative as well, and I've always been very spirit-led, so different things have just happened, and I've gone, I might go down that path. Actually, I might go that way now. You know, so before I was in business, I was a dancer, I was with the student body of Bangarra and got to travel national, maybe international, loved it, and then had a car accident, it was a neck brace. Okay, weird. So then I went into uni, and then I did heaps of community engagement work, and then it was suggested that I do my teacher training. I was like, please, I'm a teacher, really? Then I did it and really liked it, and I was like, okay, yeah, that makes sense. Cried about it to begin with. So it just kind of like happens, doesn't it, innovation? Mm-hmm. And then the biggest thing for me, I guess, which has led me to kind of where I am now, is when I was teaching, I had two children really close together. They were 18 months apart. I didn't mean to do that intentionally. It was just Bunnings was closed between Christmas and New Year's one particular year when we were doing renovations. I was like, oops. So anyway, and then during that time, I was casual teaching for just doing a bit of stuff, but I was working for Newcastle and Lake Macquarie Art Galleries, and I was writing the education kits for teachers to be able to give some content to their students before they went to an exhibition or after the exhibition. And what I found is teachers really liked that. And then it kind of coupled with the thought I had in the back of my mind previous, which was, how do I help more of my colleagues implement Aboriginal perspectives into the creative arts and the geographies and the sciences and the histories? To me, it was a no-brainer, but that was a conversation that I've just been around my whole life. So I could see the parallels, but again, it's about perspective, right? So I thought to myself, right, okay, so if we create content for teachers going to an exhibition, then the teachers feel more confident to deliver it. Then when they go, the kids have a bit more of a, I get it, because it's building on previous knowledge. So then we just needed to link some professional development and ways that teachers could assess outcomes. So it wasn't just an add-on, it was actually embedded in what they did. And that just worked. And I was like, okay, well, that's how Speaking in Colour started, literally, with that idea. And then we just kept going through more little, oh, that's a good idea, let's do that. So then I thought, but hang on, when the exhibition leaves, then what? Great resource and it's not happening. So why don't we just create the resource that the schools can buy? Well, that makes sense. You've got a textbook and that works in some instances, but why not actually have a box of things that students and teachers can touch and feel and explore? So that's how we started the education kit line, and then we're just kind of grown and grown and grown. And then shout out to Natalie over there in the corner, because we won a Female Founders Grant last year, woohoo! Which is pretty cool. So it was seed funding, and there was only 51 organisations in Australia that got funded, and Speaking Colour's one of them in Newcastle, so an Aboriginal creative hub. So it's all been about innovation. It's all been about being brave. And lots of failing forward. Heaps of times I've written something that's just been a flop, and other times things have just shone. So it's all about innovation, what we do, and then we do some cool stuff. I'm like stoked with my team. I'm like, you guys rock. So glad you're heaps better at that than I am. So all innovation.
It is that collaboration, isn't
That's
it?
a good thing too, the team.
Yeah.
Having the team.
Yeah, a better team than you, right?
Yeah, always.
Yeah, always, yeah.
And Brien, I'm interested, before we go to Naomi, I'm interested in what your thoughts were when Naomi was saying the parts about, you know, the brains of the musos, and there wasn't that much happening, but it was that communication. Not that there's not that much happening, but in the, sorry, I'm a musician as well, so I'm allowed to say that. But so in that communication space with, I know you play music with Denise.
Yeah.
So it's that.
If you don't communicate, it's if you don't communicate with the people you're playing with music, it doesn't work. It's you know, it's the difference between seeing two people do a performance of a song where you just go, oh, that's pretty, and then you see the performance of a song, go, my God, that was just outstanding. You know, it's because the people doing the music are communicating, and that's what music is. It's a conversation, and whether it's between a guitar player and a singer, or two singers, or a cellist and a violinist, it doesn't matter. It's you're listening to each other and collaborating together and working and locking into the same emotion with each other.
I must say, I've actually seen it as well between the instrument and the musician.
Absolutely.
So, yeah.
I've often said as a double bass, I used to be a double bass player when I was at university, and I said there was nothing sexier than playing a double bass, because I'd be wrapped around this instrument, it would vibrate on me, and but my whole mind would just be focused on the sound and the feeling between myself and the instrument.
Yeah, we've got 12-year-olds falling in love, we've got, and we've got children 18 months apart. So, Naomi, what's your story then? No. Yeah.
Well, in the spirit of building on ideas that have come before, I feel like I'm really hearing about connection and being there, being in the problem, being close to the problem and connected to the problem enough that you can notice what's working and not working. And it just reminds me of, this isn't my story, but a story I read about nurses in Brazil who are taking care of course, COVID patients who at times are on ventilators, which means a lot of the time they're laying very flat and still, sometimes face down, sometimes face up, but who in the fray of it all aren't getting a lot of interaction or connection. And so there's this fantastic invention that they've come up with, a nurse came up with, called the Hand of God. Has anyone heard about this? No. On the front lines of that problem, because the nurses have a connection to patient outcomes, are affected by how much they feel connected and cared for. So they're seeing the problem, they're there every day. They grab what they can grab, which is a pair of surgical gloves. And one nurse had the idea that if I tie all the fingers together and fill it with warm water and sit it around the hand of a patient, then it'll simulate as if they're having their hand held. No one has time to even, half squeeze their hand. But if we can do that, then maybe they'll feel less alone, less connected. And I think, that's a beautiful story for lots of reasons. But in terms of what our core business tonight, I think it's a demonstration of why you have to be close to the problem and you have to care about the problem for those ideas to unfold. Because if you can't tell, if you don't really love the problem, then you can't tell whether it's working or not, and you can't rewrite or have another go. So,
we like to think of problems as opportunities as well. And I was actually speaking to a colleague in India today. They've got lots of donations of oxygen cylinders. And I read right at the beginning of COVID about one oxygen cylinder, or somebody in Italy, I think, had adapted one oxygen cylinder and had 9 masks come off it. So just through so one oxygen cylinder could then service 9 people rather than just one. Yeah. So, but it was being in the middle of that problem. I'd like to. Do we have any questions so far, or any comments?
Yeah, I have a question.
Yep.
In terms of you trying to be innovative in certain, the culture of same office being. They've spent 50 years building this company, right? And there's people that are sitting on top, and yet, if you look, they're holding the most creative youth, coming through. How do we change, their ways when they're so set in their ways, when the direction of the company can sort of shift? I don't know if that makes sense.
Well, I've got a friend in New York, and he, back in the early 80s, was an accountant for a huge company. And when you guys are all too young to remember the Apple IIe computer, I'm thinking. But he had an Apple IIe computer back in 1982, 83. And he wanted to make his job easier, so he invented for himself a spreadsheet. No one had ever had a spreadsheet for a computer before. And he just went, I'm just going to make this because it'll make my job easier. Within 12 months, he had 5 other companies wanting to buy his patent for the spreadsheet. He left the job that he had and the company he was working with because he went, I've got something here that could do something. And now his company is just internationally phenomenal, all because of one simple idea. But he didn't get locked down with, I'm working for all these uber rich people as their accountant. He just went, I've got an idea, and just shared the idea and sold the idea, So I think, sometimes you just got to go, don't worry about the people who you're working for, keep your ideas fresh and keep them to yourself, and then share them and use that as your platform rather than somebody else's platform. Don't give it to the company because they're just going to,
Anyone else?
they'll take it and run.
But sometimes you just don't have that voice. Like he was probably a white male in that.
He was a Jewish white male. Yeah.
So he was privileged enough to kind of get to that point, whereas I think.
But he came from a very poor Queen's family. He wasn't like a rich guy to start with. He was just a very intelligent guy.
I think.
No, I'm talking about changing the culture or being innovative, because when it's set in a way, then how do I tell 50-year-old Doug's been there, he runs the company. There's some,
I think, is it okay if I? Yeah. Look, thank you for this question because it's really important. And I think underneath a word like play is a whole lot of things about how play works that we talk about, we think of less. We think play, adventure, discovery, laughter. But in actual fact, play is full of risk. So what we're talking about here is environments where risks are taken and consequences are felt. And in some contexts, in some environments, the power structures are set up and the purpose structures and the role structures to close out risk, to dampen risk, to take the oxygen away. And if you're a person in a system where they're highly risk averse, or you're a person in a system where your voice isn't being heard, being an innovator is very difficult. By definition, you will think different. by definition you will see different, and by definition you will have a different goal, potentially a goal that's bigger and more bold than the business is even set up to handle. So I think there's a lot that we could say about that, but I just want to pick up two things really. If you're in a system that's not about nurturing innovation, but that's about risk management, for example, I think there's two things that I've seen work well in that environment. We're trying to talk about survival in that environment. The first is your well-being and your energy and your sense of motivation really matter. So check in with yourself and go, have I got the emotional, psychological, relational resources to have a go at pushing against the system? Because I know I'm going to get resistance. That's just normal. Systems want to stay with status quo. So you know that there's going to be some resistance. People are going to challenge you or ignore you. Do you have the energy at the moment to push through that? Even if it's in a small way. Even if it's just for some people in their workplace, this is as simple as asking a question in a meeting. That's how locked out it is. So first of all, I think it's okay to check your own motivation, your own well-being, and find allies, find people to go in with you. There's no reason that you have to poke the bear, as it were, on your own. In fact, it's not a good idea to. The second thing I'd say is, if you can become really curious about the system you're in and go, well, why do these guys feel so defensive? They've been in it for 50 years. They're succeeding. What are they afraid of? And if you can get curious, rather than going, those guys never listen to me, get really curious about them. What does matter to them? What problems do they care about? What are the things that help them feel safe? Your pitch will suddenly change from being the young, angry youth going, hey, you guys should do it my way just because I'm young and amazing, to, I know you're worried about this, I know you're worried about margins, and I know you've been having trouble getting into the market of mums at home. I work for this company and I love this company. I have an idea. Can I have some room to talk to you about that? So that curiosity, rather than pushing them and othering them, will give you the tools you need to talk in the language that creates safety for them. The irony is, in that situation, they need safety from you. You'd think that they'd be providing the safety for innovative, creative people to flourish. Often it's not. Often you have to bring the safety by speaking to their fears.
Claire?
Can I just add to that? There's, I guess, and I love that overarching approach you've taken. Just to add to this one, maybe from a tool perspective. So sometimes it's like, okay, it's almost like an exposure therapy. You just start, nudging a little bit and just doing things, not going off and doing crazy things that they're just going to jump back from. There's actually a great article, if you get an opportunity to download it, in the Harvard Business Review, called, it's BEANS it's called, you guys have probably come across it, it's Behavior Enablers, Artifacts and Nudges, and it gives practical examples as to tools that you can start to implement in your organization to start forming those different conversations. So as an example, there was this bank called DBS Bank. I'm pretty sure they're a European bank. And
Singaporean.
Sorry?
Singaporean.
Oh, excellent. Thank you. Yes, I'm Irish, so I'm just going to say it. But yes, thank you. But they used to call themselves damn bloody slow, because they used to go through, the biggest stifler was meetings. So this scenario, particularly in large organizations or even in smaller ones, where I have a meeting, but because of the precedent set, everyone wants to be involved in this meeting. I'm going to invite everybody. Half the people there don't really know why they're there. And this is when you have people on their laptops and checking their phones and things like that. So they started to look at, okay, we're not being creative because we're just spending our times in meetings and unproductive meetings. So they created this tool called Mojo, which is meeting organizer and joyful observer, I want to say, which was really cool, because what it was actually, so the meeting organizer was the more senior person. And what I said, your job is to organize a meeting, get the right people there with a clear agenda. It's 1 hour, you run it in this way. It's all about getting in and out and being efficient. And then the joyful observer was the person, so for example, it could be you, and you're sitting there and you're observing how productive that session is, what are the takeaways, are people there's follow-up, it's not just emails and PowerPoints and screenshots and all that stuff that's just noise. And they gave a great example where seemingly one of the senior leaders was very risk adverse, and he cracked the shits, excuse pardon my French, in a session, and he wasn't, his cultural, like his language, everything was against the culture they were trying to foster. And the joyful observer, who's actually an intern, and she stood up and she said, excuse me, this is not right. Is it my role? I have authority as a joyful observer to stop this meeting. And she stopped it, but what it did, that one action totally changed the how, because people went, ah. And he, in fairness to this executive, he pulled up and said, you were right, I apologize, and he said, I will do better next time. And because his behavior changed, because he actually was able to see that thing through a different lens, that one tool changed their whole meeting structure, and they ended up saving something like 500,000 meeting hours over the space of something ridiculous like 2 years or something like that. Like phenomenal. But that was a small tool, but it had a phenomenal impact. So I would suggest taking that perspective and then maybe going, what tools can I use to start, getting the allies and using those people as well. So it's a really good article. Beans is one of the acronym they use, but it's in the Harvard Business Review, and they use other things like Adobe and all those guys. But I would suggest adding that as well to start the ball rolling.
And I've got something completely different for you. I've got 4 words: don't ask, don't get. And those 4 words have gotten me to Tesla Gigafactory in Reno, Nevada, writing workshops with Simon Sinek's team, going to places where I just went, oh my God, like, really, me? Why me? But I would, so what I did was I researched places that I wanted to go to and I wanted to connect with, and places I wanted to work at, and I made the connections with them. So if you're in an organisation that isn't maybe worth your energy and your enthusiasm and your everything else, not that those ideas are awesome, whichever way you want to go, this is just an alternate route. Find out where you do want to be. Most people want to help you get there. And if you write the email, write the letter, knock on the door, do whatever it is that you need to do to get there, someone somewhere along the line will say yes. So different routes, but I would just find somewhere where you really want to be and go out and get in there is my best advice. But anyway,
just my 2 cents worth too. I think sometimes as creatives, if we ever stop the flow, it kind of dries up a little. So let it go. Like if you've got innovation and ideas and creative, it's really important to be with the flow. Because the minute you kind of hold back and reserve, it kind of
locks it up.
gets stagnant. Hey,
Can I just say, sometimes just what you just said, don't ask, don't get. There's a huge gap between the intimidation of the jargon and all the knowledge of all the people with all the confidence, and the people with great ideas that are maybe intimidated by all that haven't got that conduit, and it's very intimidating, and that's something that's a little bit lacking, because we're all doing things and out there doing things, but there's a whole lot of stuff that we're missing because people are so intimidated by that lack of that conduit, and what you just said, don't ask, don't get, is so simple, and that really relates to kids that might have so many great ideas but they don't know how to get there, and they're so intimidated by that.
So let me tell you a story to back that up. We were running a music festival through Hunter TAFE, and I had a student that came to me who had come from a really shocking background, had done it really, really super tough, and if you'd been with the course for 2 years, you got to run workshops, and you got to say who you wanted to come to the workshop. And she said to me, the class has just laughed at me, and I went, why? And she said, because I really want Renee Gayer to come and do the songwriting, the vocal workshop. And for those of you that aren't old enough, Brien, I can see you nodding, you know who Renee Gayer is.
I had a great afternoon with Renee.
Amazing blues. She was a top Australian blues singer, right? So this student says, they're laughing at me, I really want her to come and do the workshop. And I go, well, okay, you're sitting here right now, what's it going to cost you to ask her to come? She said, well, I know that you're going to make me do the research, and I know, so probably about 6 hours worth of time. I went, is that all? She went, yeah. I said, right, write the email, let's find out who to connect with. What are your chances of getting Renee Gayer? If you don't ask her, 0. She's looking at me going, are you stupid, like 0? If you do ask her, what are your chances? 50%, so we went through this whole thing. She got Renee Gayer to come and do that workshop, and Renee Gayer mentored her for 12 months after that. If she hadn't asked, she would never have gotten. She came from a really hard knocks background. I can I'm so proud of her. But she had the guts to ask, and it was that whole thing. And had she listened to the people that laughed at her, never would have had that experience.
Right.
Yeah. So a lot of it is courage as well.
I love that label, don't ask, don't get. I think that should be a program in itself for kids that are intimidated by. You made that really simple by saying that, and I thought that was magic. And I think that is something that it needs to be there for people that are intimidated by the system, you know. And it can be simple.
Can be intimidating, can't it?
Yes.
So, you know, look at the diversity in this room, you know, so...
You just look at me.
No. I'm going to my next panel question. We've known each other for a while, just let's get that clear. So my next question is, because now I'm going to get specific on your areas of reasons why you're here, and you're here because of the diversity. I'm intimidated.
I love it. No. So I'm going to go on from your bit. Diversity is age too. It's gender, it's lens, it's bias. It comes down to so we're in a growth phase of our business, right? So sounds really... Do I say we need more diversity in our business because we're all Aboriginal women. So we've got a heap of queen bees, right? And it's like some days it gets right. Yeah, it's happening. Yeah. So putting it out there, I think we need to start getting some males in the house. But so because you come from a lens. So for me, I've got preteen now. It's a whole new lens that I'm developing in my life. But how I view work-life balance, how I view products that we're creating, you know, as a teacher, always coming from a teacher lens, you know, from a musician, you'd come from that musician creating. So diversity comes in many different ways. And what's actually happening in the workplace now is more and more businesses are saying we do want to have diversity. We don't know how to be risk adverse and still get our billable hours and make sure the balance is happening. But if we truly want to be innovative, we can't have the same people, the same degrees from the same institution, born in the same decade, because we're just rehashing the cookie cutter. So diversity is gender, age, lenses from, you know, and we're so our unconscious bias is dangerous. I mean, my conscious bias is actually taking me, I'm trying to get used to pronouns at the minute. I'm not good at it because everyone's just like, babe, hey girls, babe. It's like, yeah, no, that doesn't work anymore. It's, you know what I mean? So it's to be respectful and stuff. So for me, diversity brings innovation, creativity, but you need to be, like Brené Brown says, you need to be truly leaning into, you know, leaning in, right? Because if you want innovation, you need to be brave, and there's a risk factor there. So it's tricky. It's tricky for people who have been so risk adverse, who are right down to the spreadsheet and the dollars and the time and money budget. So how do you do a time and money budget and have that creative? And I keep coming back to that word margin that you said before. We forget about margin. Yeah, we do. We don't have margin in our time. I don't have margin in my time. Yeah. Anyway.
So my second question is, in your specified fields, and yours is diversity, what is it that how do we create those environments? And you've kind of half answered the question, and then Brien, yours is with that whole railway area, and Nikki with that conscious leadership, and Naomi with the leadership aspect. But in your individual fields, how do you create those opportunities for innovation using each of those identified skills and each of those areas that you're in? Who wants to go first?
I can talk if you want.
Yeah.
Just off the back of what we were just discussing a minute ago about environments of, like, I guess, psychological safety. I guess just listening to that, I clearly come from a very privileged space where I've never been in a workplace that's adverse to risk. In fact, our workplace is the complete opposite to that, which is very scary in itself a lot of the time. I nearly fall off my chair. So I guess for us, we've always been a space of conscious leadership, and I think in that, what you were talking about before, I think it's really, like, as leaders, I think we're in a very privileged position, a very important position, where it's our responsibility to actually create environments like that. And a lot of that is, most of that, in fact all of that, is how we choose to show up, and it's how we choose to hold the space. It's not just the systems we put in place, it's not just the structures and the people we put on, all those technical things that a leader needs to do, and the strategies. It's about how we show up. So, you know, taking a conscious space, we're valuing things like empathy, and we're valuing collaboration, and we're valuing people over profit. And we're doing all those sorts of things that enables innovation to happen in our workplaces, and enables people to put their hand up and ask. I can't even believe that's a thing. And we all talk over the top of each other.
So the speaking of which, but the purpose, because I know that you're very purpose driven.
Extremely.
Yeah. And that purpose, I think, going back to, I love your question, it's really triggered a whole lot of emotional stuff for me as well. But that purpose gives you the courage at times. I find that purpose gives me the courage
to push through. Because you're moving towards something that you really care about, that you really want to see happen. Like it's the positive impact on the other side of that pain that makes it worth it. It makes the courage and the hard and the, you know, it makes it worth it. So, you know, even little things like, I was just saying to the team the other day, I did a Facebook Live for the first time ever the other day. And I wanted to vomit. I was like, I don't want to do this. I tried to talk them out of it. I'm not ready. And even though I've been doing this for 15 years, I'm not ready. But the idea of being able to get that message out and perhaps help someone on the other end of that, just out of a little 10-minute, what can I do here? This is going to spread our purpose and help other people understand what conscious leadership's about, or how to lead purpose in their organisation. It's worth it. And then the response that you get back, it's like, yeah, I'm glad I did that. I'm glad I pushed through, despite the fear. So I think I'm really, like, as a leader, and I think a leader's not a title. It's like everyone could be a leader. Everyone can practice conscious leadership. And I think there's things that we've got to look at the way we contribute to the innovative environment. And this isn't just the leader in the organisation, but I think everyone in the organisation is how are we showing up and what energy are we contributing? Because without that positive energy, there's no creativity. And if you're coming into a brainstorm or a creative meeting, or if you're coming into anything with a negative energy or a, you know, bringing those sorts of things, and you're not coming in curious, innovation's not something some people have and other people don't. It's something that we build within ourselves, and we build our innovation ability. So, and we also influence everyone around. Like, I know for myself, if I come in and bring an energy to a meeting, I directly influence the amount of creativity and the innovations that come out of that room. So I have a direct influence on that. So I just think there's things we can do, which is why I'm such an advocate for positive psychology, because your well-being and the way you are able to manage emotions and the way that you're able to look after your well-being. You know, if you haven't slept for a week and you haven't looked after your well-being, and you go into a client meeting, you can't think of anything for them that's useful. And your heart's not in the problem, it's all wrapped up in all the other things. So I think there's a personal aspect that we need to take responsibility for if we want to be a part of an innovative environment.
I was going to say, off the back of that, can I just say, one of the best things for me when I went to New Jersey to work was that the person who sponsored my visa to work said, you know, you're a creative, you've got great ideas, so what I'm going to do is we're going to put an arts lawyer on the team. You don't have to worry about paperwork. He said, you just sit there, you throw out your ideas, he'll work out how to get the money for these things to happen. He will be the guy who will draw up the contracts, he will do all that. You just go out there every day and you just throw your ideas out there and tell them to Larry, and Larry will get the money for it.
Everyone needs it.
Larry!
And for the 2 years I worked there, I worked hand in hand with Larry. And he was, Larry's background was he was one of the first people that put together the South by Southwest Festival in Austin, Texas. He was the innovator of the Lollapalooza alternative music festivals across America. That was his thing. He wasn't like a creative in the sense of, I'm going to do this. He just loved creative arts and went, I have this skill for making things happen for people who have the ideas to make them happen. You know, they can't get that part of it together because often when you're a creative, you're just too busy throwing your brain around, and you don't go, how do I draw a contract up, you know? So Larry was the guy.
Where do we get those?
Well, you know what, they're probably around, and we probably have them here.
In Newcastle?
Yeah, they're very neat looking in their colour code stuff.
Oh, Larry always wore a beige Bermuda suit. You know?
The day I met him too.
Yeah.
I want to ask you a question on that though. How is it? Because some people say to me, "Oh, you're just lucky," and you go, "It's not luck. It's putting yourself in the path of everything that can happen." How did you end up in Railway?
I ended up in Railway because in 2008 I hiked the Inca Trail in Peru with a cancer-based charity, because I was working with a guy from a band called the Stray Cats who were popular in the 80s. They invited me to come on this trek, and I did it, and I met a guy on the trek called Jim Kennedy, who was impressed by me, because when every other musician because it was a whole music charity, they were turned up in hiking gear, I turned up in a pair of black jeans and a black leather jacket and some Doc Martens, and went on the first day, let's go and hike. And they said, you can't hike in that. I said, I'm comfortable. But this guy Jim Kennedy was big on the cafe racists from London from the 1950s, and he kind of identified me with that, because I looked like I should have been on a Triumph motorcycle, you know, that he loved, and we developed this relationship. He said, if you ever come to New Jersey, look me up. And 6 months later I was there, and I went and spent a day with him, and he took me to show me his prize motorcycle. And the guy's a congressman in New Jersey who will drive his motorcycle in a leather jacket to Congress, because he goes, my brain isn't about what I dress, how I arrive, it's about me. And he was probably the most inspirational person I've ever met in my life, because you'd sit in the car with him and people would just bring him and go, yeah, you need to talk to blah, 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 blah. You've got to do this, you've got to do that. And they go, okay, thanks. And then the phone ring, and he'd be talking about someone else, you need to be connected to this person. He didn't do paperwork, because he said, I'm terrible at that. That's Larry's job. But I can tell people who they need to talk to, who they need to connect with. He said, and that's what you should do too, because he said, you have creative ideas, come up with the ideas and let the people who are good at paperwork do the paperwork.
And that's why innovation is a team sport, because you need all the different types. Cherie, how does diversity play out in innovation at your place? I know you said you'd like some males and maybe Greek heritage females or something. I don't know. Yeah,
males.
Yeah, we're pretty much. But how does it play out? How do all the different aspects come together?
Yeah, so today we had a robust conversation, actually. So sometimes it's colourful. And someone was like, oh, I just don't get it. And I'm like, yeah. But this is what the corporates want. Oh, but that's not how you do like learning and assessment. Yeah, I know. And someone else goes, but da-da-da-da. So we all had different lenses, and because we all specialise in our different fields. So it was a really great way to someone goes, oh, but hang on, you forgot about X, Y, and Z. Or, oh, I used to work at AIM and we used to do this and this for our corporates as well. That would be a really good idea. And I was like, yeah, that's a great idea. Let's pin that. Let's get back to finishing this. And then someone else went on a tangent. I was like, yeah, really good idea. How do we finish this though? Okay, I was like, oh my God, I need Larry.
You need Larry.
So that's diversity. You get ideas outside the box of we're here to do this, and when people come in with a different lens and go, hang on, what about that idea? Sometimes that actually the offshoot is a far better idea than that. And it's just being brave enough to, we love post-it notes.
Yeah.
So yeah, definitely age, your training, your background, your lens, and even just how we hire. So we are unique in the sense that it's people, you know. So it's I remember when Jamie first started with the business, I said to her, "Can you do any admin?" Because I knew she was a hairdresser, and I knew that she worked at Coles, and I thought, oh, you're just such a people person. I said, can you do any admin? She's like, yeah, sure. But she's still with the business, and she's one of my best presenters.
So
she's
she won the
gold.
job.
Yeah, like she's gun. So we just kind of move people through and then find a spot for them where they shine, you know.
Yeah.
So that's
Branson says, say yes and figure out how to do it later.
100%. And that's what happened with us last year with COVID. I kind of liked it, and sorry for those people that hated it, because creatively we did lose a lot of business, but it got me off the tools. And it got me thinking, all right, I've got a second for R&D here. I can either cry about it or I can let the creative juices flow. Yep. And this contract came through, it was with the Department of Education. They're like, well, if you can still deliver online, go for it. I'm like, yeah, sure, we can do that. And I was like, oh my gosh, how do we do that?
Yeah.
And then
you solve it.
3 weeks later, we had 10 hours of online content, and then a month later, another 10 hours. And that's one of our biggest products that we've got now that we are just refining. And I've gone, oh, this here can be this and this and this. And then someone said to me, I went to one of my corporates and I said, oh, I've got this. And she goes, we don't want to do 3 hours on a Zoom. Can't you do something like that? And I thought, oh, yeah, we could do like a X, Y, and Z. And then all of a sudden, we've got this whole other product line that we're developing now, which is super cool.
Excellent.
Just don't know how to build it properly yet, but we'll find a Larry.
You'll find a Larry.
So, Naomi, leadership. And coming back to, again, sorry, what's your name?
Frank.
Ronnie?
Frank.
Frank.
I don't know how I got Ronnie out of Frank. I'm just going to blame reviews.
Similar.
Yeah. But so leading on from that comment with leadership, how does that work?
Well, I think the thing that's coming to mind to me as I listen to these other thoughts, you know, this idea about Larry is very interesting. It's got some energy in the room, so I think I'll speak a bit to that, which is that if you don't know what it looks like when it's working, if you don't have some measures for success, it is very hard to know whether an idea is worth pursuing. So I think sometimes what the Larrys of the world are doing is they're letting us know, here's what it needs to do before it's working,
sure.
And before we can kind of tell whether or not it's worth investing in. And sometimes those measures for success or those criteria for whether or not I go further are really simple. You know, the criteria at the start might be, do I have the energy to try? Yep, okay, let's go. Do I have the energy to give this to someone to look at to give me some feedback? Yep, let's get the feedback. What job does we really need to do? Well, we just need 10 hours of content. We could do 50, but really we just need 10. So actually spending some time defining what are the criteria that make an idea valuable in your context, that is actually an important and quite structured, orderly, Larry kind of thing to do. And so in leadership, sometimes organisations aren't getting the most out of their people because in the culture there's no clarity about what it looks like to win.
Yes.
How do I have a good day at work today, boss?
Yeah.
They can't really tell you, oh, we're updating the KPIs from 6 months ago, oh, we're going to review the strategic plan in August. That's no good to me. So I think defining that criteria around, how do I know when I'm doing a really good job? And if it's not tangible in human language, throw it out and start again.
Yeah.
The other thing that, from a leadership and culture point of view that I spend a bit of time doing is encouraging those who do have a bit of responsibility over the environment or the vibe or the processes a team use, is to encourage them, how can you turn up the safety element here? How can you make it a bit more permission to talk about failure? Do you have a process for failure in your team? When there's a failure, what is it that you do? Because even if you've got a process, here's our 5-point plan for having a failure. First of all, you go to the confession booth, and then we all have a Tim Tam. And then we meet for 20 minutes to talk about what really went wrong. There's no judgment in that conversation. I'm making this up as I go along. But you see, you and your context can have a bit of a process around how you personally want to approach failure. Do you want to be silent about it and depressed and have another night in front of Netflix? What's the process that's going to work for you? Because if failure is going to be part of it, you need a process. And one of the things that makes it safe to fail is if we know what's going to happen when we do. If I fall over and scratch my knee, I know that mum is going to come and put on a Band-Aid. That's a process. It helps me to be less freaked out when I fall over. Same sort of thing. So spend time helping. I think it's important, if you don't know Larry, I mean, there's going to be some people asking for his number, I can tell.
Nobody knows Larry.
Think about what are my success measures? What's my criteria for evaluating an idea? How do I know whether it's worth it? And the second thing is, if you are responsible for others and creating a bit of a team environment, what are you doing around making it safe to fail or safe to take a risk, safe to have a laugh? So they're two things.
There's an organisation called Blue Chili. They work with startups, and they have what's called the Golden Cock Award, and they give it out every week. Yeah. No, it's a rooster. Sorry.
Larry gets one.
Sorry, yeah. But it's not a badge of honour. But if you get it, it sits on your desk, and you actually have to come up with the reasons why whatever idea was, why it failed, so that the whole team learns from it. So that's their process. You just reminded me when that.
And do you know, I think a big thing about so much stuff is that so many people I meet don't have the ability to just go, you know what the hell, I'm just going to do this. You know, I'm just going to do it, you know. And it's like when Jim Kennedy said to me, I had a good job here and I had a good career here, and he said, I'd love you to come and do this. And it was in November, and I went, you know what, I'm going to do it. I don't know if it'll work, I don't know how it'll go, but I'm kind of sitting here comfortable, and I've never been happy being comfortable. And so I just went, yeah, I'm just going to go and see where it can take me. What's the worst thing that can happen, you know? And I think that's one of the, for me, a facilitator for innovation is the fact that if you can go, I'm going to let go of my comfort and my perceived plan of who I am and what I am, and just go, I'm just going to go and see where this takes me, you know, then you're in a good position to make things happen, you know. Just don't be scared.
We're kind of out of time.
Yeah.
Are there any questions? Was there any more questions from anybody?
I just wanted to make a comment about Larry. Sounds like a great guy. I just think like all of us are speaking from this mentality of like hoping for somebody to believe in our innovations, like our ideas of innovation. But there's a whole lot of people out there that believe in innovation but aren't necessarily the leaders of that, and they are the Larrys, and they're looking for us to actually step out.
Absolutely. And
so that they can actually pour their talent and unite it with something that we do, and together that's really special. And so,
and look, Larry was
like where's Frankie, you know, where's
Larry was an amazing musician, by the way.
Who is Larry?
The guy I'm talking about, the arts lawyer. He was an incredible musician, but Larry just kind of, he had an extra strength for enabling musicians to do bigger things, and he kind of understood that he had this brain that could do contractual things to make arts projects happen. His wife was a music theatre singer in New York. He loved painters, he loved theatres, he loved everything about the arts, and so he realised his strength was not playing flute. That was his joy, but his strength was making the bigger picture for so many other people.
That's what, going back to strengths that I was talking about before. If you can apply your strengths, that's when you're at your most innovative. So that's a self-awareness piece. Like if you don't know what your strengths are, go and find out. There's a lot of different ways you can do that. But that's what's to say. I don't think Larry's not the innovator and not the creative. He is the innovator and the creative. He just applies different strengths to that. So everyone's, what I was saying before, it's not a characteristic that someone has. It's not you've got it, but I don't. It's I've built it and I've learnt my strengths, and I put myself in situations. I've built my courage. I've built my curiosity. You can actually build up your innovation ability. So through self-awareness, there's the essence of conscious leadership, I would say. But yeah, all those different things that you can do to actually become who you already are, basically.
Passion and drive creates innovation.
Yeah.
So if you haven't got that passion and drive behind it, innovation's not going to happen.
It's intrinsic. You can't be going towards something that's extrinsic. Correct. It's got to be something that's intrinsic to yourself.
And this is why we need diversity, right? You need people with different skill sets, different hats, different lenses, and makes the wheels turn.
100%.
And it goes back to what Naomi said in the presentation. It's bloody hard work.
Yeah.
Like it's hard work.
But good work.
But it's great work.
It's great, but it's passion driven.
And you have to have that passion to get to, you know, that the cliche almost now that says you've got to have that passion that gets you out of bed every morning.
Yeah.
Because otherwise, like, it's hard. And you know what? I do some business consultancy, and I say to people, fetal position, 5 minutes, go for it. Cry, kick, scream, tantrum, blah, and then get back up again.
I do the 5-minute rule as well.
So do I, yeah.
And one of the things I must say is that I took to New Jersey was one of Christina's ideas, which was, imagine if there was a 24-hour arts block out, and you woke up in the morning and you couldn't turn on television because people behind cameras and script writers do that. You couldn't put on clothes because someone designed the patterns on your clothes. If you couldn't, there was everything. You couldn't look. You had to cover every picture on your wall because that's a creative has done that. You couldn't sit on a chair because someone designed the chair that you're sitting on. Everything in our life, you know, the things that the community see as they ignore every day is that the things that are just from creatives' minds.
They define us.
They define our whole culture, and you know, and we were talking about doing that in New Jersey, and it was just like we just couldn't get the city to say we're going to have an arts blackout. You can't have, you know, we're just going to cover everything up that has something to do with the arts, and no one can watch television, no one can watch the football because they're wearing jerseys that someone designed the patterns of, and you can't, you know, it's. But at the end of it, that creative spirit drives everything in our culture and defines our cultures, you know. And I thought that was an amazing idea that you had. You know,
Yeah, I don't know how to make it happen either.
Well,
I brought it back from 24 hours to 1 hour and thought it
We
was
do
too
it in
hard.
Newcastle. That'd be
We
good.
could, well, you know, it's a good exercise. Clover Moore, Sydney, were interested in doing it too, but I don't think anyone can quite get
almost
their
have
head
to
around
be like Christo, where you just get sheets and
it.
just
Pretty
cover
much has to be everything.
everything.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Don't get out of bed.
But seriously, it would be everything gone
It would be.
because you couldn't look at anything that someone had put a creative energy and idea in.
Yeah, you couldn't lie in your bed. There you go. Yeah.
Get out of the bush.
Sit on the grass and meditate.
You'd be naked in.
It's like in the bush.
But isn't that where true creative comes from?
See, I'd be so happy with that.
Same.
I'll be my own.
Larry.
I don't want to be there in Larry.
I'm going to do this. I'm going to go one piece of the best advice you can give for innovation from each. So just one. Let's just go. You know, no more than 30 seconds. And then if you've got anything to share, as in that one piece of take-home advice, so that in the collaborative spirit we all wake up tomorrow morning and go, yes, I'm going to go out there and innovate because this group of people that I was with last night gave me the courage to do so. Naomi, what would be your 30 seconds worth?
Take the pressure off yourself. Offer some of this support we've talked about tonight for someone else.
Nice. Thank you. Nikki?
Oh, mine would hands down be get to know yourself. Like, write down, spend the time. What do you care about? What are your values? What drives you? What are your strengths? Get to know yourself really well, because that's when you can connect meaning to something, and meaning's what creates innovation. So,
Love it. Thank you. Brien?
Mine would be start with children and get them to learn that they can grow up with that, so that by the time they're adults, their whole life has been directed towards being creative and innovative.
Beautiful. Cherie?
I'm going to go a little bit different. I would really love to see Australia embrace Aboriginal people and culture. I think this is a really good thing for us as a country. It makes business sense. It makes commercial enterprise, creative, tourism, you know, be a part of the change, live in purpose, and even if you can just make your immediate sphere a little bit better, it's worth it.
And mine is put yourself in the way. Just put yourself in the way and see what comes, and don't ask, don't get. Words of wisdom from
Love that.
from you guys. What would be your piece of advice?
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
I was just wondering, from your perspective, what that would look like for Australia to embrace Indigenous culture.
I would love to be able to see every time a visitor comes to Australia, they're met at the airport with a welcome to country in language, even if it's a digital representation. Yes. I would love to see a country where it is normal to hear about Aboriginal people and culture in every classroom. When you're at university, you have a lens where people are proud of our heritage of this country, where we don't have to debate over things like change the date. Really? I would really love a long weekend to celebrate being Aussie because, dude, this is a cracking country, but I am not doing anything but protesting on that particular day because that's messed up. So I would like to be able to, like, I've been to New Zealand, right? And you see that beautiful kia ora where
As soon as you walk
can
in the
own
airport.
it. Whether you're Māori or Kiwi, you own that. And
even
that's,
down to sport. Like, you look at every single sport game.
Yeah.
so
They
it's
celebrate
systematic.
the culture, but Australia
But
doesn't.
they dealt with it.
But
They
it's-
dealt with it very early on.
I've
They
been
dealt with
at
it
a Kiwi
in a
airport
different.
with
Yeah.
There's
Indigenous, like,
So there's lots of things that have happened, but basically you got to talk about the system. And what happens is because there hasn't been a treaty, in our current constitution we're still referred to as the coloured inferiors. It was penned in 1901 by William Barton. That was the anthropological school of thought at the time. That does not fit or serve Australia today. The economics in New Zealand, the cultural economics is $6 billion a year. So even if we come from a business perspective, it makes sense. The UN have been saying to Australian leaders for a long time, shame, shame, shame. Oh my gosh, people come from overseas and come here and go, hold up, what? You get away with doing that? There's mandatory sentencing today in several states here in Australia. Just before COVID, there was a young boy in Carnarvon that stole a Mars bar and got locked up in remand custody. He was a first-time offender. 11 locked up with men. Sorry, what? So, you know, we can't move forward. I'm first generation not removed, and I just turned 43. So this isn't stuff that happened, you know, this is something that's really real and relevant. So for me, I just think, okay, well, I can't solve the world's problems. I got told when I was younger, you know, you got to think of yourself like a link in the chain. If you do your bit well, you enable the chain to work. But if you don't live your purpose, then you don't do that. Someone said to me, oh, was it last night at the EO function, old mate, star mate, what's his name?
I know, tell me what he said and I'll tell you if it was.
Oh, it was pretty profound.
Larry.
He goes, Larry! He said, at my last day in life, if I was to meet the person that I could have been, I had the potential to become, like what would that be like? And I sat there and I thought, hang on, we have multiple forks in the road, there's sliding doors, right? So there's plenty, I mean, you know, I grew up in Windale. I loved growing up in Windale, but I'm the only one in my crew that actually got a degree. I'm on my 3rd degree. I do not tell that to my mates that I grew up with. They're like, what? You know, I got a big new black beast of a car. I wouldn't drive that through the old block that I grew up and be like, oh, sis, give us a ride. Go on, then. You know what I mean?
That just reminded me of a friend of mine in New Jersey who ran all these amazing, she was African American, she ran all these amazing programs, and one day I was in the car with her and she's talking to a cousin and her whole language turned into something, it was just like the language and everything, and she said, I can't talk like I normally talk to my family, my cousins, because then they would just think that I've just traded my culture.
Oh yeah, so you have your personas,
Yes.
right? You definitely get your personas. But the thing is, with Speaking Colour, we're a for-profit business, but our data in our not-for-profit, like even though we technically aren't a not-for-profit, is phenomenal. Phenomenal. So like some of the programs that we do, like if you don't know about Speaking Colour, jump on social media and check us out, because our last exhibition, which we did on the smell of an oily rag, at the Newcastle Museum, had 144 elders and community exhibit. They learnt cultural practice for the first time and got to exhibit, but we had 445 kids. They got to have their name in a
I
catalogue.
just think it's just such a sad missed opportunity for connection and belonging in a country. It's like you look at New Zealand and you think it actually brings them together. They're all proud of that culture and where they come from. It's a sense of belonging to that country.
And it's also
missing.
story. It's this, like, so there's have you seen any of the, have you been to Biami Cave or any of the mapping sites near Wollongong? Oh, are you? Oh, well, while you're here, you should go up there. But we've got the most amazing, and to actually stand in this, or near this cave, that's full of Indigenous history and story and the dreaming and the respect for the land and the respect for food and the respect for every bit of what is around you is all in story. It's all there. And now I believe, I hope that we're starting to go, oh, hang on, crap, use all the fish when we're cooking? Isn't that what used to happen? So embed yourself in the story, and you can't help but fight for it. Yes. Sorry, I know we're running late. Oh.
I just wanted to quickly add, just like I'm an Irish woman, I'm proud Celt, and we have a strong history now as well, but I actually had this conversation with somebody 2 weeks ago. I said, how do I find out more about the Aboriginal culture? I really genuinely want to understand and respect the people.
Yeah, good question.
And I hear one side of the story from predominantly white male and white female people who have a view of the world.
Yeah.
And I'm like, how do I educate myself so I understand the culture and can respect the elements? Like, I have no idea where to go. So how could I go about doing that?
Let's do a tour. Well, you can't do one lecture and be an expert. So I'm a researcher and high school teacher, and meant to be finishing my PhD any day now. But yet my third slide is always a massive disclaimer, because how many years do we do our degrees for, and how many different lecturers do we teach under? I mean, I'm not an expert in all things Aboriginal, even though I was raised by my Aboriginal nan and literally would sleep in the same bed with her until I was about 8 until I got kicked out. It's like, oh, Nan, I was nan's girl. So I'm very privileged, right? But there's a lot of community that haven't had that. So for you, if you want to learn, I'd say diversify your reading, viewing, watching, listening. Jump on and start getting familiar with movements like Trading Black. Is today Wednesday? Yeah. Okay. Well, I'm always wearing Aboriginal earrings anyway. But Wear It Black Wednesday is a thing now, because what is happening in the commercial space is, especially those people who are getting government tenders, you need to answer, have you diversified your supply chain? So what we're trying to do is really encourage Aboriginal businesses to get up, because Aboriginal businesses employ Aboriginal people. But really, if you've got an Aboriginal product, it should be created and distributed by Aboriginal people, right? So one of the biggest issues that we've had in the creative industry for a long time, and it's happened to me before I was done a couple of things. I used to be a curator and artist, would you believe it? Anyway, there you go. I probably should have said that. Yeah, anyway, never mind. So there's amazing artists out there who are doing amazing work. Wayne Blair's has got a couple of more theatre productions with the City Theatre Company happening at the minute. It's just every now and again. I believe the arts is how we change the world. It's when you're laying in the bath and you're reading a novel. And when you're sitting at home with your glass of Shiraz and you're watching a movie, or you're listening to a podcast cruising down the freeway and you're like, oh, it's a different perspective. You don't realise this is reframing. But the thing with our biases is educational theory. Now I'm starting to lecture. You should have got me going. Educational theory tells us our foundation is formed by the time we're 7. And this is why it's important to have diversity in our workplace, because we don't realise how much of our biases and our foundations lay who we are, whether we've been raised in a single parent household, two parent household, how old we are, whether we have children or not, what our cultural, what our religious background is, there's so much stuff. So that's the only way to do it, is the arts. Diversify reading, viewing, listening, and just get in amongst. If you get a chance, New South Wales has the oldest man-made structure in the world in New South Wales, and it's the Brewarrina fish traps. The oldest human remains in the world are in New South Wales.
It's the second largest canyon in New South Wales as well?
Oh, I don't know about that.
It is, yeah.
Probably.
Canyon out in this go.
Yeah, right.
It's the second largest compared to the Grand Canyon.
An hour away from here is a mapping site. It's like blew me away the first time I went up there. You can go, respectfully go. Yeah. And look at Aboriginal media. So NITV brought out a thing. National Indigenous Times brought out something yesterday talking about the astrology stories are very linked to the Aboriginal stories. So for me, growing up, hearing, I'll just stop there. But look up a website. Yeah, we do cool stuff. Jump in some of our training.
Yeah, no, I'd love to. Yeah, awesome. Thank you.
So it's 9:02. And anyone want to just throw in a word of wisdom for everybody else in the room while we're at it?
Australia's a pop land, needs to be planted.
Nice. You know what? I like that. Especially. Just got a pot plant the other day. Did yesterday. It's a great analogy. It's awesome.
Yeah.
It's sort of way overdue.
Yeah, but it's got to be native, right? You got to plant local.
Any other words of wisdom from anybody before we close officially? Can you thank the panel because you've been freaking awesome? Those people that don't have to race off to babysitters or anything else, can we hang for another 10 minutes or so? Just casual conversation around the back.
Yeah.
Carla, thank you so much. Shane, Luke, Nat, Claire, everybody.